Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back again, and today I once again want to talk about Fat Nick. Now, I know I have already covered him pretty extensively in a video that I did about a year back, but I mean, come on, that was a year ago. A lot can happen in that period of time. Although, to be perfectly fair, when it comes to a lot of artists that I cover on this channel, that's usually not the case. I mean, I get a lot of requests to do follow ups on videos that I've done in the past, with many people asking me, where are these artists now? And I understand why people are interested in that. I mean, after all, a lot of people are very drawn to the idea of somebody being at the peak of their career, having all the money, all the fame, and everything that they ever wanted, only to then fall off and have to cope with that. However, I hate to tell you, but 9 times out of 10, it's usually not all that interesting, as most of the artists that I cover either fall into one or two camps, with the first being SoundCloud artists who are long past the prime of their career and now are trying desperately to do everything they can to get eyes back on them, which in concept sounds kind of interesting, but unfortunately in most cases it comes down to them either shilling a crypto coin, getting in trouble with the law for something petty, or if it's not one of those two things, it's usually them saying something purposely offensive online to try to get attention, which is honestly one of my least favorite things ever when it comes to the modern day internet. I mean, if you want to say something offensive and actually mean it and actually stand behind it, then be my guest. I can respect that. But if you're saying something offensive to purposely try to get people mad so you can get attention, then I'm sorry, but I find that kind of lame. And the second camp of people that I often talk about is underground artists. And while I'm not trying to say that underground artists are averse to things like controversy, drama, or beef, I mean, that's far from the case. Look at most of the news stories coming out of hip hop in recent years. They're all about underground artists. But most of that type of stuff is coming from new generation rappers. I mean, when you have nothing to lose and nothing behind your name, why not try to get attention online by pissing people off? I mean, whether you get negative attention or positive attention, as long as you have people watching what you're doing, that's all that really matters. I mean, the worst possible thing you could do as an entertainer is make your audience bored. If you're making them angry, that's an emotion. If you're making them happy, that's an emotion. If you're making them sad, well, you get it, that's an emotion. But if you're making them bored, well, they're probably gonna tune out. But that's the thing about the people that I talk about. They're a lot more established within the underground. I usually talk about people who have been making music for the better part of a decade. And when you have that sort of legacy behind you, you don't want to throw it away for a simple viral moment. I mean, that's really the dream for a lot of modern artists. Make enough money off of your music that you can live comfortably, have a solid fan base that wants to listen to everything that you put out, and then simply just continue to make that music without having to do any sort of extra work to get people to pay attention. And that's especially true for people like Suicide Boys, Night Lovell, and Bones. I mean, they've been making music so long that people just naturally associate their names with the underground scene, and because of that, they don't really have to do any extra bullshit to get people to want to listen to the music. Not to mention they're starting to get up there, which I know is an absolutely crazy thing to say about people who are only in their 30s. I mean, people live to like 100 nowadays, so I don't know why everybody thinks 30 is so old. But when it comes to the modern day internet, the music industry, and really life in general, people see 30 as old. By the age of 30, you're supposed to be calmed down. You're not supposed to be tweaking out online anymore, getting attention, and doing shit that you would do in your 20s. And while I don't fully agree with that, I mean, you should be able to do what you love to do no matter what age you are, I do understand that a lot of people want to see their favorite artists calm down as time goes on. But unfortunately for people like Boot Gang, Lil Pump, Smoke Perp, and especially Stitches, they can't really do that because they're more known for their antics than their actual music. As much as these artists try to do something more emotional and heartfelt, it really can't keep an audience long term. I mean, all 4 of them have made sadder songs about the negative emotions that they deal with, but people don't really look at these artists as actual people and more so look at them as memes, jokes, or, well, just a character. Meaning that they can never really gracefully fall into the background and become a more respected artist. And because of that, it really seems like there's 2 very separate paths that you can take in the music industry. You can either keep it low key, work on your craft, and eventually build up your fan base over the course of years, or you can do everything you can to try to get attention and blow up big only to then fall off. But that's where Fat Nick comes into the equation, because he kind of is in both camps. On one hand, he is somewhat of a fallen off SoundCloud rapper who's long past his peak, but on the other hand, he's also semi-respected within the underground. I mean, Fat Nick has been around just as long as any of these other artists. He's been making music for the better part of 15 years, and he's helped a lot of very influential people get their start within the industry. I mean, he took Lil Peep and Smoke Perp on their first real tour. I mean, that's gotta mean something, right? But despite that, he's never really been given the same sort of respect as many of his contemporaries. He's not looked upon as one of the fathers of SoundCloud rap. He's not really seen as influential in any way. I mean, people will give him an offhanded remark about how he was there from the beginning and he is somewhat important to the Florida underground. Besides that, you don't really see a whole lot of people talking about the legacy of Fat Nick. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that he's more so known for his persona than his actual music. I mean, name me 10 Fat Nick songs right now. I bet you can't. I'm not saying that he doesn't have good music or he doesn't have classics, but I'd be willing to guess that a good majority of the people watching this video were first introduced to him through one of his antics rather than his actual music. So what is somebody like Fat Nick supposed to do when they find themselves in this middle ground? I mean, your music still does well when you put it out, but nobody's really waiting around for that new drop, and your persona is starting to waver a bit because, well, the SoundCloud wave is over. This whole look of having face tattoos and being a drugged out maniac is kind of past its prime, so you kind of gotta adapt. And well, if you're in that type of situation, you gotta start a podcast. And honestly, I don't even want to shit on this idea because in concept, I actually think the All But Six podcast is a really good idea. I mean, you take two artists who have been in the underground scene for years at this point, who undoubtedly have a treasure trove of different stories that have never been told before about them going on tour, different interactions that they had with artists during their come up. They probably have a lot of stories about doing drugs in different countries, just overall a very crazy lifestyle that I think a lot of people would be interested to hear about on a podcast because they're not mainstream artists who have really done it all with the industry behind them. They're underground artists who built their entire career on their own. Who wouldn't want to hear about that? I mean, not only is it a good guide for upcoming artists nowadays, but just overall, I think it's an interesting thing to hear about. And that's before we even get into the potential of the guests that they could have on this podcast. I mean, with Nick and
Mikey the Magician
both being underground rappers themselves, it means that they could relate to the people that they get on the podcast. And because of that, I think the conversation could be very natural. So of course, after realizing that they were going to do this podcast, I was very excited. But after listening to a couple episodes, I quickly realized what they were going for. They're not trying to do some sort of deep, introspective podcast about their time in the underground and all of the trials that they had to face to get to where they are now. No, we couldn't have that. We're living in 2025. So instead, we gotta spend the entire podcast bitching about different things and trying our hardest to get a viral moment. I mean, who cares about underground rap at this point, am I right? We're living in the big 2025. It's all about streamers. It's all about getting people pissed off. So let's spend an entire episode bitching about food, standing in lines, traffic. Like, who the fuck wants to hear about this?
Listen, me on hard, I'm a good 4.5er. I think 4.5 inches is a respectable wiener size. Why does India smell like shit? And why do they cut chicken on the street with toenails?
And in every single clip that I see from the podcast, Nick comes off as very unlikable, which I do understand is kind of the point. He's trying to say purposely offensive shit to try to get people mad at him, so they'll then tune into the podcast and give him more views. But well, you're not doing it in an entertaining way. I mean, if you really wanted to play into this persona and truly be the villain, then you should be calling out other rappers, talking about rappers that you've actually fucked with and no longer fuck with. Complaining about how you don't make as much money as Playboy Carti comes off as whiny and annoying. I mean, I understand he's the biggest fish in the pond at this current time, and at a certain period, the two of you may have been on a similar level, or you might have actually been a little bit bigger than him. But at this point in 2025, nobody really knows who you are anymore, and Carti is massive. If you're trying to get his attention, it's not gonna work. You gotta aim a little bit lower. I mean, why don't you get somebody like Kid Trunks on the podcast? podcast and really dig into why he lied about cancer. Wouldn't that be an interesting idea for a podcast? You could probably make it happen. I mean, if you're going for shock value, that's where you want to aim. But it kind of makes me think, why is Nick even trying to go this path in the first place? I mean, why throw away a legacy that you've been building up over the course of almost 2 decades to do this bullshit? Is it really worth it? But then when I thought about it more, I started to realize, does Fat Nick even really have a good reputation? And when I really started to think about it, I realized that it seems like a lot of people are more negative on Nick than positive. I mean, if we go all the way back to when he first started making music, it seemed like he came from pretty humble beginnings. I mean, back in those Raider Clan days, both Puya and Nick were more so affiliates to the group. They weren't really looked at as full-on artists who were actually supposed to be taken seriously. They were more looked at as kind of meme rappers, if that was something that existed back then. Although as time went on, Puya would start to gain more and more respect within the underground, whereas it seems like Fat Nick just continued to play more and more into the joke. I mean, buffet boys, Fat Nick really likes to eat. Even his rap name, Fat Nick, it's all about how he's overweight. And while at the time that was pretty novel, in the long run, I don't really think that gimmick is going to take you too far. But luckily for the two of them, it wouldn't be long before they started to evolve past Raider Clan, as Puya would really start to pick up attention for doing different mixtapes with other prominent underground artists, and as Puya got bigger, Fat Nick would of course come along for the ride. And by the time that 2015 rolled around and the two of them ended up appearing on one of the very first No Jumper podcasts, it was very easy to see the type of dynamic that they had together. Puya was the more outspoken and abrasive one who would say whatever's on his mind without really giving a fuck about the consequences, including going into very graphic detail about all the great that he was having. Let me tell you, man, 2015 was a very different time, whereas Fat Nick was a lot more quiet. He would chime in every once in a while, but for the most part, it seems like Fat Nick was very comfortable with sitting back and kinda letting Puya steer the entire ship. Although, as time went on, that entire dynamic would flip on its head, as Puya would start to get himself into trouble by various different means, with probably the most prominent one being when he ended up doing a documentary for Vice, where he ended up bringing a bunch of prostitutes to the studio to try to make it more interesting, but then he got in a fight with one of them and came off as very aggressive towards women, which definitely wasn't a very good look. Puya would later get this taken down by suing the company, as well as going on to blame them for setting that moment up and making him look bad. And while to a certain extent I can understand that, I mean, after all, Vice was probably trying to get a viral moment, but at the same time, it's not like they held him down and forced him to act that way. I mean, at the end of the day, you're in control of your own emotions and actions. I do understand that you were trying to make it a little bit more sensational by bringing prostitutes to the studio, something that you don't usually do, but I think more than anything, this was a bit of a peek behind the curtain of how Puya actually acts in his day-to-day life, and after that was revealed to the entire world, he basically did everything he could to try to make it go away. Almost overnight, Puya went from being the raunchy guy to a devoted husband who was only going to be with his wife Coco, despite the fact that they were constantly on and off again, and he cheated on her when she had cancer, but I mean, that was all behind the scenes drama. For the most part, he was able to create this decent persona for himself of being a humble guy who loved his fans, appreciated everything they did for him, and would never be unfaithful to his wife. But the issue with that is that Puya is still a rapper, and honestly, I think people are a lot more fascinated with seeing a rapper crash out and be a complete degenerate than actually be a good person. So with Puya no longer carrying that torch, Fat Nick would have to step up, and let me tell you, he definitely did, as during this time in 2016 to 2017, it was really the prime of Instagram antics. And Fat Nick would do all the classic stuff, flexing money on the gram, walking around with guns, doing drugs on camera. I mean, it was all pretty par for the course at the time.
You know, Young Rich and Handsome, PSA, you know, they be saying shit like, damn, fan, he be sipping too much, damn, fan, he be eating too much, yo, suck my dick, still gonna fuck your bitch. You dig? You gonna die young, bitch, I'm gonna die a legend and rich, you dig? You gonna die a little crumb. You know, I got money in my cup, got a little crepe. Your crumbs don't even got crepes and money in your cup. So I do both, boy, a little dip, a little, ooh.
But because all of this was seen as so normal during this period of time, it really didn't stand out all that much, and Fat Nick really continued on as a kind of background character in the SoundCloud wave. I mean, he was known, he was respected, but he wasn't a big name like Pump, Peep, or XXXTentacion. However, all of that would flip on its head when Little Peep ended up passing away, because as you already know, almost everybody surrounding him at the time would get a big boost in clout, as after all, everybody wanted to pay attention to the tragic tale of a young rapper who lost his life too soon. I mean, it's like a modern day Kurt Cobain. Of course people are going to be fascinated, but people were doing more than simply watching this all play out. They were also pointing a lot of fingers. I mean, Peep didn't simply pass away because of an overdose. It was malicious. Somebody had to be behind this. It was either somebody from Goth Boy Clique or somebody who was around him in the underground. I mean, his best friend Bexy ended up recording him after he passed away. It must be his fault. Macnim was apparently the one who gave him the drugs. It must be his fault. A lot of crazy accusations were being thrown around at the time, and a lot of those artists were dealing with a crazy amount of harassment, especially Macnin and especially Bexy, even to this day. However, for the most part, a lot of the people who were actually around Peep would stay quiet. I mean, their friend recently passed away, and because of that, they were not only grieving, but they also didn't want to make it into a big spectacle because that would be kind of disrespectful. But well, here comes Fat Nick completely jumping on board with all of the online narratives. I mean, after all, he was getting a fuck ton of attention off of being friends with Peep, so why not continue to play into that? We're talking Instagram live streams, interviews, and much more. And not only was he talking about the time that he spent with Peep, he was also talking a lot of shit, with him being the first one to start that rumor that Little Peep wasn't part of Goth Boy Clique when he passed away, despite the fact he wasn't even aware that Young Goth actually wasn't a member of Goth Boy Clique. He probably had no idea who was even in the group and who wasn't, with him getting a bunch of details confused. But despite that, he would continue to say that he was the only one who knew the truth and everybody else was lying about Peep to get clout. Not to mention him heavily endorsing the release of Falling Down, a collaboration between XXXTentacion and Little Peep, which wasn't actually approved by Peep's mother and was simply put together as a way for the label to make more money. Now, do I actually care that this song came out? No, I think it's a pretty good song, and I think a lot of the controversy around it was a bit inflated, but Fishnark would come out later and say that apparently Peep actively hated X, although I don't really believe that due to a bunch of different factors. Check out my video on the many beefs of Little Peep to know more about that. But despite that, anybody who was promoting the song at the time really came off looking bad. Not to mention Bexy, DJ Scheme, and Fat Nick all going on the No Jumper podcast to further promote the song. Now, on one hand, you can look at this interview as three friends grieving their two fallen comrades and trying to talk about stories that they have with them, but after you realize that DJ Scheme basically built his entire career off of having two dead homies, you realize that they were more so there for clout. With Fat Nick even going on to say that there was apparently plans for Little Peep and X to meet only a couple weeks after Peep passed away, despite having no proof of that and it never being confirmed by any sort of third party. It really reads to me as the whole Trippy and X thing where, yeah, I made up with X before he passed away. There's no real way to confirm that, but it definitely happened. And it's not like anybody's gonna give you pushback on that because after all, you're grieving your fallen friend who recently passed away. If I were to call you out about lying about that, I would come across as the asshole. So nobody really questioned it. However, the fans of Peep were not fucking with Fat Nick. I mean, they weren't really fucking with anybody at the time besides Little Tracy, but they were especially mad with Fat Nick, which is kind of funny to see because I think he was trying to play into the whole hateful narrative of going after Goth Boy Clique, only for the entire thing to flip on him only a couple months later once it came out that he was probably lying about a lot of this shit. However, despite that, a lot of this only went down within the Little Peep fanbase, and while in late 2017, a lot of people in the broader rap game were very tapped in with this story, as the years went on, people would forget about it, and Fat Nick's reputation overall wasn't too badly hurt. See, that's kind of the double-edged sword when it comes to online infamy. Somebody like Little Pump is always going to be known as Little Pump because he reached such a level of success that everybody who was aware of him knew what he basically stood for, whereas Fat Nick never really got to that level, and because of that, he could eventually change his reputation. However, as the years went on, it didn't really seem like he was making much of an effort to do so. He would simply remain as a friend to both Puya and Peep, constantly talking about how his friend passed away, and basically soaking up all the clout that he could from that situation. However, by the time that 2020 rolled around, the world was a much different place, and the internet was quickly changing away from that SoundCloud era into a more hyperactive, dopamine-chasing hellscape that it still continues to be even to this day, meaning that Fat Nick would have to change with the time. Unfortunately, he wasn't going to be able to gracefully fall into the background like many of his contemporaries, and if he wanted to keep the attention on him, he was going to have to pull something big. Not to mention at this point, Puya's reputation was completely destroyed due to a multitude of factors, with the biggest of all of them being that he has an absolutely horrible allegation behind his name that took place in 2017, and despite the fact he tries his hardest to play into the anti-cancel culture bullshit, a lot of people aren't really buying it anymore. I'm gonna blow your mind here, guys, but it's not woke to care about people taking advantage of women in horrible ways. I think no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, we should all collectively come together to hate predators. I don't think that's exactly a crazy thing to say, but apparently a lot of people don't agree with that. But despite that, it is an allegation. I'm not saying that it happened for sure. I have an entire video on that on my second channel if you want to check it out. But whether you want to believe it or not, it would do a pretty hefty amount of damage to his reputation, with him no longer really wanting to be in the forefront and instead moving into the background as a more mentor sort of figure. With Buffet Boys quickly becoming All But Six, a management company that would put on a lot of new talent, with the most infamous being Kill Switch, and with the new talent on board and Fat Nick still willing to get his name out there in any way possible, the two of them would start to make reels together, with Fat Nick actually gaining a little bit of an online following from this. It was kind of like Puya was the brains of the operation, but Fat Nick was the face. Although this would start to shift a little bit around 2023 to 2024, as at this point Puya felt like enough time had passed for him to finally be able to show his face again, with him and Fat Nick appearing on a Montreality interview, which got a lot of attention for a couple different reasons. I remember a lot of people hitting me up at the time very upset that Montreality would platform these two, although I don't think it's that surprising. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of rappers are degenerates and weird people, so if you're trying to avoid every rapper with any sort of allegation, you'd never get an interview again, let's be honest. And you know what? I watched the interview, and honestly, it kind of made me sad because the entire thing is basically Puya constantly bullying Fat Nick. And yes, I know they've been friends forever, and longtime friends like that like to give each other shit, but when you really look at it, it only seems to go one way. Puya is constantly shitting on Fat Nick, saying you're fat, you're unhealthy, you're disgusting, and I'm only saying that because I love you, and Fat Nick isn't really retorting in any way. And when you find out how the two of them initially met at a skate park after Fat Nick fell down and ripped his pants and Puya immediately started to laugh at him, you kind of realize that Puya's probably been bullying Fat Nick for his entire life. Now, I'm not trying to be parasocial here or say that I know for sure. I'm only looking at very limited context that I've seen from the two of them interacting during interviews. But just from looking at their overall dynamic, it seems like Fat Nick has really low self-esteem and he kind of was always picked on as a kid. And because of that, when this Puya kid ended up giving him attention and wanting to be his friend, he immediately grasped onto that, which was definitely a good move because I mean, Puya made Fat Nick rich and famous, which is definitely a good thing for a friend to do. But at the same time, Nick probably feels kind of indebted to Puya, and because of that, he probably lets him treat him however he wants. Now, is that really their dynamic? I'm not really sure, but when looking deeply into the way that Puya acts and the way that Fat Nick acts, it kind of seems to be the case. But once again, speculation. There's no way to know for sure how they actually act behind the scenes. But here's the thing about that interview. It's kind of a good thing for Nick because it makes him feel like a sympathetic character. I mean, his best friend is mean to him. He has constant problems with the relationships. He just seems like an overall sad, funny, kind of charismatic dude who you probably want to pay attention to. But that's once again the issue with this All But Six podcast. Nick is supposed to be the face of the brand. He's supposed to be the charismatic one that draws everybody in. And when he's sitting beside Puya, who's an absolute dickhead and doesn't really try to hide it, he looks like the better of the two. But when sitting alongside
Mikey the Magician,
who I'm sorry is boring as a plank of wood, he comes across as kind of an asshole. And not the type of asshole that you want to pay attention to and love to hate. Just a nagging, annoying asshole. And once again, I don't think that Fat Nick really needs to be in this spot. He could restructure the podcast right now and make it a genuinely entertaining piece of media. But if he continues to try to rage bait in a very blatant way, I think all it's gonna do is make him lose more longtime fans and not really gain him any new ones. You either need to play into the villain role better than you're doing right now and fully embrace it all the way, or you need to back off on it and try to be more introspective. Either way you take it can probably work out, but if you stay in this weird middle ground where you want to piss people off but you don't want to go all the way, you're never going to get anywhere. I'm sorry, Nick. Nobody cares about your opinion on politics or woke shit or garlic bread. Nobody gives a fuck. I mean, I don't think that his reputation is so far gone that he has to play this role. He probably could save it in a way. I mean, obviously he's somewhat likable considering the fact that him and Puya have the exact same allegations. I mean, if you read them out, Fat Nick is also part of it. He's a willing participant, but despite that, nobody really brings it up when it comes to Nick, whereas with Puya, they seem to constantly follow him around. And as weird as it sounds, I think it comes down to the fact that, once again, Puya is an unlikable asshole and Fat Nick is a lot more charismatic. But if he continues to go down this path, he's probably going to wind up in the exact same spot as Puya. But at the end of the day, he's a grown man who can make his own choices, and I am interested to see where he goes from here. But like I said, I think if he continues down the same path, it's not going to work out for him. But with all that said, let me know what you guys think about Fat Nick. Are you a fan of his? Do you like him, hate him, not know about him, don't care about him? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 33K. Sorry for the shorter video this time. After making that absolutely massive trippy video, I need a little bit of downtime to work on the next documentary, but it is in the works and it will be coming soon. So with all that said, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.